This is going to be a general introduction to TI Portal. So what we're going to do is to just start the TI Portal. We're going to look at the menus. There's some toolbars. What else do we have? There are some settings. We're going to make us a new project where we can actually work with your PLCs and whatnot we have in our project, and so on. And at the end, what we're going to do is to insert a device. So what we're going to insert is a PLC that we are going to use. So let's go ahead. So I've located TI Portal here on my desktop, but I've also attached it to my taskbar down here. That's just so I can start it a little more conveniently, I think. It can take some time for this program to start up. We are going to use the version 16 here. There will be newer versions, and they will be changed a little with respect to version 16. Maybe there are going to be new features in newer versions, like a CFC feature. This one is lacking CFC, that's continuous function chart. So when you open the TI Portal, this is what you get. There are two views here. You have got a portal view. You can select that, and here's what you can do. Let's say in a more organized way. Here are projects or that I've been working on. So what I would recommend is to use the project view. Then it's going to look more like an explorer. So it's easier to work with. We have got some menus up here. And you have to familiarize yourself with the menus, but new project, obvious we have to use that. We can open an existing project migrate and stuff. We have got more. So there are quite a few menus. An important entry here is archive, save your work, and at least you should do it once a day when you're working on this. Edit, our standard edit menu, cut, copy, paste, and so on. View, so here are things that you can view over here. So at least the project view is kind of had. You can hide this project. Okay, online. Say they're all grayed out, but online, that's when you're working with a real PLC or the PLC simulator to test your program. Options, we're going to go back to settings. Tools, that's not that important. Window, a nice one here is to split screen. Then you get the split screen here. So you have one, let's say a window here and a window here. You can drag and drop between those. That's kind of handy for this program. And help, show help. There's comprehensive help here. The help is really good in TI Portal. When we go back to options and the settings, when you're working with this, it takes a little time to first general language and mnemonics. Use international mnemonics. You have the option for German too. The most recently used list and so on. Here you can decide in which mode when you start Portal. So just leave that the most recent view, then you get what you have. Here, when you get a little down here, this has to do with storage. Where do you want to store your programs? The default in here is made by TI Portal. So what I have is a D drive where I store my project, and here's the path to where we have it. I have a path for libraries, a path for projects. So let's say we can look a little at let's say my D drive here. If we find it here, data D. So the 16 we looked at, these two. If we can move this a little, if we can grab this. Archives, the backup, like that one here, project here, and libc, and then I have some other catalogs too. Just scroll a little further on. Yeah, and retrieve. That's when you archive, then you save. It's basically just a zipped file that your project is saved as, and you can also retrieve it. And then you have what we call data export. So you can export data, which are basically things that are in the TI portal database. You can't access the database as a database, but you can export and import things to and from the database. Yeah. So we scroll a little further. Look at these colors. These colors, they are set up to match roughly Visual Studio for setup. And the font, when you're doing programming, you need a monospace font. Courier New is a monospace font. A monospace means that all letters and numbers and special signs and characters and whatever occupy the same horizontal width, which makes it easier to read a program. So for programming, that's usually what you do. Yes. Then there are tabulators. You can use tabulator, but that's a code. So if you have code in your source files and stuff like that, and you export those and use in another editor, it's not going to look that nice, maybe because it has other tabulator settings. So usually you use spaces, and the space are 4 spaces. That's normal here. Yeah, and then it's indent here, which has to, when you do your coding, especially in high-level language. This is for high-level language, and it's important that the smart, then TI portal organizes your lines in your files for you. The code, it organizes it. We are going to use none, because it's important to line up the assignment marks in your program. That's where you change variables and stuff like that. That's important to know where you do that, and usually you align those vertically. Yes, good. Let's say if there are some more settings, it's basically just to play around with these and see what they do. So scroll down. Well, what we went through is some of the important ones here. So let's say what we have done now. We have not been through the toolbar that much, but the toolbar is usually just a subset. They come in handy for as a replacement for the main menus up here. So they are shortcuts for the main menu items up here. So what you can do here, you will find on the main menus. There's another also important thing with programs like this, when you play around, is use your right mouse button. Then you get up something called a context menu, and here you get suggestions about what you can do. What's gray here you can't do, but what it can do is, maybe I could compile something, but I can't, of course. because I have nothing in here. I don't have anything in here. So to start to work on this, I need a project. Here I get a tooltip, new project. It's the same as this one. You see also the icon here is the same icon. So let's do that. That's the first thing we have to do. Now, as I in the setting I said I want to store this under project. What do you want to call this project? I'm just going to call it introduction, if I write that correct. I think I do. What version it is, and so on. And now he asks, he wants to store it here under projects, and here you can change that. So I have a project here where I have already some project. So I just want to call this introduction here too. So, of course I can't do that. I can just select a folder. That's what I asked for. I already called it introduction. And then I create. And the TI portal, it might take some time to do this. It's just give you an idea. It takes some time. So it's constructing the database and stuff like that. So it takes some time, but it hopefully is going to be complete soon. Okay, something happened. So what we are going to do now is when you get a project here. So now there's another thing here, is that we have some windows. I can maybe move over to the other side here. I want to do was to set the overview and the settings. So you can see you can change down here. The settings we are done with. So now we have the project here. It's just a way of how we look at your project. I like to look at it like this. So what we're going to do now is just insert a CPU, a PLC. And now we can also try to use the context menu. Nothing here. Yes, it was. So here we have add new device. But what we have here too is that you can use this entry to add a new device. It's basically you can use a context menu. You can probably do something up here too. I never do. So we are going to add a new device. It's also going to take some time. So what we can do as this is let's say totally integrated automation, what we can do is we can do controllers. They are PLCs, HMI. That's where you operate on your program. You can start and stop things or whatever you want to do. The PC systems is well, they have got soft PLCs and they have got also HMI, human machine interfaces, that are running on PCs, and then you've got the drives on the bottom. If you have installed the drives, I have frequency converters. What we are going to do is to go to controllers, And we are going to find a controller here, the 1516. I'll see if we have. There's a lot of different types. The F CPUs here can take some time. F CPUs down here, they are fail-safe. Those are the safety PLCs where you can use to shut down your processes and stuff in a safe manner. What we are going to select here is one that we have. We're going to use this one. Here you can also select various version of the firmware of the operating system that's on the CPU. And here we get a little information about what the CPU, the capabilities of the CPU. And it asks for a name, PLC 01. That was pretty much what was on there. Because there can have more than one PLC in this in a project. So this is going to complete this session. We are just going to insert the CPU and see what the CPU looks like when it's inserted into the project. So what the program is doing now is that's going into a database and fetching the CPU that I selected and inserting it with all its properties. It can take some time, as you see, but here we got it. So when you insert the PLC, it's going to look something like this. You have got a view of the PLC, and the PLC here, what I inserted was the CPU, and the CPU can have modules on it where you communicate with your process. And communicating with the process is what you are controlling. So you can use something called a digital output here. I can insert it here, and one of this digital output could close a breaker, for instance, to get current to flow, or start a motor, or open a valve, or something like that for you. And digital input modules, it's another module. We're going to look at that later. Digital input could be a feedback from, for instance, the motor I have, that the motor is running. So when I start it, I can check, is it running? Okay. There's quite a menu over here for a CPU. The device configuration is how to set up the CPU. How you set up the CPU or configure the CPU. Online diagnostic. If you have a real CPU or the PLC simulator, you can go online and look at it, and there are going to be error messages when you have errors in your program and so forth. Software units, some special, we are not going to talk about that, but what we are going to do here is, of course, make programs to the CPU. That's what we have to do. Technology objects depends upon the CPU you have, what it can do. Here you can just play around with the CPU and do whatever you want. And here we have got something called external source files. What you can do is you can import data to TI portal and export from TI portal. And those are what we call source files. And they can be, let's say, compiled to a program that the CPU can, that you can work on in the CPU. So if you have some program you have made for different projects or something, you could export there and import here. But you could also have two instances of TI portal running at the same time and just copy it from one to the other. PLC tags, those are names on what I talked about here with the outputs and the inputs. For instance, the motor I wanted to start, that output that started the motor would have a name here in these tag tables. Yeah, data type, user data types. I'm not going to talk much about them. Watch and force tables, they are kind of handy. I can add a new one, and what I can do is that I can put into this watch tables information that's on my CPU, down on the CPU, and then I can watch online. What are these variables? A number, is it 100, is it 50? OPC UA communication, we are not going to talk about that either. So what we are going to concentrate on here is programming the PLC. We can do quite a bit more in here, but mostly programming. And when we are testing the program, we can use watch tables, and we have to make tags and so on. And we might have to import external source files and stuff like that. Yeah, to summarize, what we did here was that we started a TI portal, looked a little on the menus and what you can do here. What you can do is do what I did, just look at the menus, play around. You can't do anything wrong. The worst part you can do is to delete your project, then you can make a new one and start fresh. And we looked a little on the toolbars, and we looked at the settings, and you saw the settings that I had, and I would suggest that you use the same settings that I have, colors and stuff like that. And also make, let's say, catalogs on your PC where you save your project. Of course, these are just drives, so they could be on a network drive or something like that with a backup on it and things like that. The last thing we did was to just insert the CPU in the project. We selected a CPU 1516 01. But when you have selected a CPU, what you can do is you can replace the CPU later on. Okay. And then we looked at some of the possibilities that or the things that you could do with a CPU.